Interested in real estate? How about wealth? Well, they go hand in hand. And here, you'll learn all about it. Welcome to Be the Bank, a podcast where we discuss and debate the topics centered around real estate investing. Your host, Justin Bogard, shares insights into investing in real estate to create real wealth and passive income for you and your family. He'll share stories of real estate investments done right, walk you through the process of owning a real estate note, and most importantly, educate you so you can be the bank. This is Be the Bank, brought to you by BrightPath Notes. Now, here's your host, Justin Bogard.
All right, welcome to episode number 5 of the Be the Bank podcast. And today we're going to be discussing with my good friend, Mr. Joe Varnadore, about foreclosures and how things are changing and evolving with foreclosures, and also a little bit about zombie houses. So stay tuned, and that's what we're going to be bringing to you today on episode number 5, which is brought to you by BrightPath Notes. Joe Varnadore, how are you doing, buddy?
Justin Bogard, I am doing very well, man. It is. I'm excited to be on here with you today on Be the Bank.
That's right. Yeah, you were on the an older iteration that I had called Two Wealth Show, and now it's called Be the Bank. So you are, a 2-time guest, which I'm excited about. So those of you that don't know Joe or don't know my history with Joe has been one of my mentors since I've gotten into the note business, and Joe is the reason why I got into the note business as well.
That is amazing. Yes, Justin. Or I remember it was back in we met in Indianapolis in June of 2016.
It was, yeah. I don't know if you remember this part about it, Joe, but you were having an issue with your spreadsheet as doing the one-day class that you did,
right? And
I kind of volunteered myself to go up there and be like, "Hey, I know a little bit about Excel. I can probably figure this out." And I get up there and, man, you embarrassed the pants out of me because I had egg on my face because I couldn't figure out what to do to fix your little problem there. So anyways, that was...
Well, sometimes you just can't fix it, right?
So anyways, so Joe, I know a little bit about you, but the listener here doesn't know a lot about you yet.
Right.
And one of the things that I think is cool is that you live in Okeechobee, Florida right now, which you had taught me that means big water. Is that right?
Well, yes. So we're about 100 miles south of Orlando, and we're right in the middle of the state. And Lake Okeechobee, Justin, is the second largest freshwater lake fully contained in the U.S. Fully contained. Okay. Not, some of the Great Lakes are bigger, but they go up into Canada. Yeah. So, yes, that's what it means. It's a Seminole Indian word. So when I grew up here, and then, about 15 years ago, I moved back here to kind of raise the family. So, yeah. Been in the note business a long time as well.
Yeah, so let's talk about that little journey with your note business. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but I know you start off and you ran into the guy who's also one of my mentors as well, and your friend and part of note school as well is Eddie Speed.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I started out, I was 19 years old back many years ago, just 1978, 79, and I was flipping houses, or I flipped my first house, and then in 78 or 79, and then did, wholesaling and fix and flips and some landlording and so on. And so ends up doing that until 1990. And I found the note business and met Eddie. And as a matter of fact, I had my family, my father and I had, over 100 single family rentals that I've moved into notes back about 7-8 years ago. So we've got a portfolio of that's a family trust, and then we've got other I've got other stuff that I continue to do, and then Eddie and I kind of do some things in note school as well. So yeah, it's been a good time. It's a lot of fun.
So I remember this because you and I actually did a radio show a few years. I want to say it's probably 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And on that radio show, you had brought up about the first time that you had flipped a house was in 1978. And one of our mutual friends, Brett Snodgrass, was on the radio show too. And he pointed out, and he was like, "Hey, wait a minute. Justin was born in 1978. It sounds like you flipped a house when Justin was born." So we were kind of dating ourselves, right?
Yes. It's the OG thing, Justin, the old guy thing, right?
Old guy.
And yeah, I know Brett, and I know you and he are very tight. And but yeah, It's hard to think about that, Justin, but just understand from the OG that it goes by very, very quickly.
I'm starting to realize that as I'm looking back through my little career and that little lens that I got. So awesome. So I know that you also have a hobby that you don't talk about a lot, but I think it's a pretty cool hobby, and you are a pilot.
Yes, I am. Justin, by the time I was 32 years old, I had made enough money to think that I could get into a career in aviation.
Okay.
Because literally that you do start at the bottom. And so I invested, I don't know, I'd been a private pilot, but then I invested about $60,000 in getting my, rest of my licenses, a commercial license and a type rating and all of that. And so, I did that commercially, flew for Comair, which was Delta's commuter airline back in the early 90s. And I realized that my passion was not what I didn't want to make a career out of it. Right. Okay. And somebody asked me, it's funny you bring that up because somebody asked me about 3 months ago, we were talking about this and they said, do you regret doing that and spending, that money and that time? And I said, absolutely. Because at this point in my life, I can never look back and say, I did not chase that dream. Because the biggest thing is you don't want to look back and go, man, I wish I would have done that. And you always have to wonder. So I am happy that I did that.
No regrets.
No regrets.
Gotta live with no regrets. I like that. So do you still fly today for fun?
I do. My sister and I have a Carbon Cub, which is just a two-place airplane and made out of carbon fiber, and it's the old Piper Cub, but it ain't the old Piper Cub. It's a pretty slick airplane. It's you can take it off in about 300 feet and almost go straight up. So it's a lot of fun. Yeah, we just nice. Got it about a month ago. We had a 1949 Piper Cub that. Well, if you were flying along the roads, the cars were going faster than you were. So.
That's amazing. It still stays up in the air going that speed.
Right. That's it. Yep.
So you haven't flown like by the Bermuda Triangle or anything since you're in Florida, right? I don't have this worry that you're going to go back in time or forward in time, right? Hitting the Bermuda Triangle.
You know what? I think it would be pretty cool. I'd go either way. Back or forward, but we skirt it. We fly over to the Bahamas occasionally, and you skirt it, right? You're on the south side of it, so. But that's a big thing, right? And there is something to it.
Yeah, there's no doubt there is something weird going on there. Whatever you believe, whatever conspiracy that you were thinking about. So, but we're not here to talk about that. So, you are a pilot. Aspiring to be a note investor, or were you always a note investor and then you were aspiring to be a pilot? I guess
it was how you I did not lay in bed at night when I was a kid dreaming about being a note investor or a real estate investor. I laid in bed at night dreaming about being a pilot, right? Yep. And but my dad encouraged me, at a very, when I was 17, 18 years old to do real estate. And that's what I did. And, it enabled me to do things in flying that I would not have been able to do if I'd had a whatever job that I had. But, my plan was, a pilot works, you fly about 80 hours a month. So I could still do my real estate and note stuff and still be a pilot. But
so you could actually fly to some of these properties that you have loans on if they were far enough.
But I can tell you, Justin, that you can buy a lot of first-class tickets for what it costs to fly your own airplane.
I bet fuel is a whole other cost that I can't even fathom how much it costs.
Yep. It's not an inexpensive hobby, that's for sure.
But that's cool. You're one of a handful of people that I know that is a pilot and does that stuff, on the side for fun. So that's a very cool hobby.
For sure.
Awesome. Well, Joe, I want to get into some discussion and some debate today. And an article that popped up on DS News, which I know is a platform, or a website that you and I both visit frequently just to get some information to see what's going on. I thought an interesting article that popped up about foreclosures. And excuse me, it was talking about how we have had very few foreclosure starts throughout the start of the pandemic and through the pandemic up till now. And so after the holidays, after December, something kind of switched a little bit. And it looks like, according to this article, that they said they went from about 4,100 foreclosure starts to 32,900 starts of foreclosure in the month of January. And this data comes from Black Knight Financial Data, for those of you that don't know. And so what I kind of have in my thoughts and predictions about non-performing loans and all these forbearances that happened during the pandemic and stuff, it looked kind of bad at first. And I always saw the data kind of showing the national delinquency average kept going down every month, every month. The forbearances didn't look as bad because even though there were, let's just call it 9 million forbearances that went through, they kept correcting themselves because of early payoffs, because they were selling their house or refinancing, because the real estate appreciation saved those people from really getting into a bad situation. Needless to say, there's still loans that can come through and be foreclosed on. So my long-winded story here comes to a conclusion to say, I don't see a tsunami of non-performing loans coming down the pipeline. I definitely see an uptick in them. I don't know what that really looks like, whether it's going to be a slow drip all the way through the next couple of years, or if it's going to be, kind of somebody turns on the water faucet for a couple of months and lets a bunch of them through. And then it's going to end up kind of trickling out. So I don't really know which way it's going, but this article is really cool. And I know you kind of skimmed through it a little bit to show that, hey, something is happening right now. So Joe, what are your thoughts on that?
So I, have a lot of, in the industry, from hedge fund managers and guys that are buying and in bulk $100 million a month and stuff like that. So here's kind of what that looks like. When the pandemic started, there was about 800,000 legacy loans. Now I'm talking about loans that were past due before the pandemic. Okay. That were just kind of carryovers from the Great Recession, right? From 08, 09, 10, 11, 12, 13. So those loans were in place. And then we have the pandemic that starts. And you're right, there was about 9 million people that were in a forbearance plan. Mm-hmm. And then they were either 12 or 18 months in length. And then they could be extended as the process went through. Mm-hmm. And so interestingly enough, Justin, and we're talking about just forbearance plans right now, not stuff that's delinquent outside of that, outside of a forbearance plan. Mm-hmm. So it dropped down to about 2 million loans that were still like in August of 2021. And then it was like about 700,000 dropped out of that because they came out of their plan. Their plan expired.
Right.
So there was right at 700,000 that dropped out. There's still about a million more still in a forbearance plan. But the ones that dropped out, Justin, 60% of those, of 600 plus thousand, almost 700,000, have not been able to make their payments since their plan expired. Okay. So we have those. Now, not all of those are going to end up being a foreclosure, because there'll be some, they have to qualify for a mod, right? Yep. Or they may get it thrown onto the back. So there's some challenges there. And then you add on to that, there's about, as close as we can figure, about 1.5 million delinquencies, right? That are serious delinquents, more than 120 days.
Okay.
So, Justin, again, not all of those are going to end up there, but it's not, as you said, it's not going to be a tidal wave or a tsunami, or it's going to be that gentle trickle. And the experts say, and I was talking to Darren Bloomquist, I'm going to drop a name here,
all right,
that runs is the chief analytic for auction.com.
Yeah.
And we're going to see these things flow through. And it was funny because when you and I were talking, there was an article in DS News yesterday, and it says vacant homes slowly decline as foreclosures rise. But apparently there was, it says 1.4 million residential properties throughout the U.S. are vacant. They were zombie homes.
Okay.
Justin. And so now those are starting to sell. And the interesting part of that is because there is such a shortage of properties that people are buying those now, the ones, and these were rough looking properties. You remember those from the last thing, right? Boarded up and all that, but people are buying them to either redo them or tear them down and build houses on those lots. So there's a lot going on.
Absolutely. So Joe, thanks for reading into more than what I asked for, because I think you gave great relevance to what we're both trying to say. So back, and I wasn't in the note investing business around this time when the real estate market crashed in the 08-09 era.
Right.
And it took a couple of years, then all these loans kind of fed through the pipeline. So a stat that stuck with me, and if I'm inaccurate, Joe, I want you to correct me. A stat that stuck with me is that during that foreclosure tsunami time period, there was an average of 250,000 loans that were being foreclosed on monthly.
There was somewhere, Justin, in that time period, there was somewhere between 6 and 7 million Americans had lost their homes. Yes.
So
big number.
That time period, compared to what we are now, yes, the number jumped from 4,100 to 32,000. That is a significant jump. A sevenfold, I believe, is what the article kind of led to in the DS News that we're referring to. But that's not a lot. Spread that out over an entire country, and that's not that many foreclosures that are starting the process. We have 50 some states, so it's a larger number, but it's not gonna flippers aren't gonna race to the in our state it's going to be the sheriff's sale, race to the county courthouse steps and going, okay, I've got 200 properties to choose from here. I'm going to find one and be able to come home.
Let me give you the counterpoint to that, right?
Okay.
You said we could banter back and forth here, right?
I encourage it.
Here's the thing, Justin, and so Darren, auction.com, they keep the analytics on all this auction stuff. Here's the thing. Real estate has never been more on fire than it is today.
True.
Ever, right? Article yesterday, 70% of the houses that were sold in January were, there was multiple offers, right? So real estate has never been more on fire. So even at auctions, people are paying up. People are paying over property, over, what it's worth still at auction. Here's the thing, that when you learn this space, Justin, we're buying those, or we're getting those before. We can buy them directly from a hedge fund. So a hedge fund like Pretium, right, which is a $25 billion hedge fund, just bought a bunch of, I don't know how many thousands of loans, non-performing loans from Wall Street or from banks and GSEs, government-sponsored enterprises. And they'll buy those, they'll keep what they want, and they'll sell the rest to folks like us.
Yeah.
So we're buying those at somewhere between 30 and 60% of value. And unlike back, in the day in the Great Recession, 95% of those houses were underwater, because if you remember back then, there were way too many houses. Yep. Today, inventory is at an all-time low. So we've got, if you know folks like Justin, that you can pick up some amazing deals out there in the marketplace.
So you brought up a good discussion point. So just kind of stepping off to the side a little bit. So I had Jamie Bateman on my last episode, and Jamie and I actually talked about how you would foreclose or go through the foreclosure process before COVID and now after COVID. And so what you brought up was the fact that housing is such a big shortage, which has also caused an appreciation acceleration on all real estate across the board. So a mortgage now won't be underwater. It would be very odd to see a mortgage underwater today versus what it would be before COVID. And so before COVID, obviously, and further back towards 2008, 2009, you would see mortgages that have a lot higher balance than what the property is worth today. Now you're seeing the opposite, where you see a mortgage balance, but then you see the property value that's significantly higher, and it keeps on going. So it's interesting, and I bring that up because Jamie and I were talking back and forth about how do you vet and how do you do due diligence on an asset before COVID versus after COVID, and we brought in the legal balance factor that you and I have talked about offline.
Right.
And so you brought up a point about, specifically you said of value. You didn't say of balance, you said of value.
Mm-hmm.
So when people look at of value, it's different. You're getting phantom equity is what I call it,
Right.
into the house as soon as you buy it. So yes, you are getting 30 to 60% off value of the house, but that doesn't mean it's 30 to 60% off the unpaid balance or legal balance of the property.
You're exactly right. And so, yeah, the profile of a house when you bought it, if you bought a non-performing loan back, in the great, after the Great Recession in 07, 08, whatever it was.
Yep.
The house had an unpaid balance of 150. The house was worth 110.
Yeah.
And we could buy that for, $30,000.
Yep.
Right. And there was a lot of room to work it out and forgive balances and all that. But you almost always had to foreclose.
Right.
Today, that profile is the house is worth 250. The legal collectible balance, the balance that you can collect, which is the unpaid balance, plus any of the fees that, the lender that had it, spent on that during the period that it was non-performing. Heck, the loans that were just sold by, Fannie and Freddie, they had an average delinquency of 29 months, which predates COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So they're still working on getting rid of those loans. But anyway, so it's worth 250. Legal collectible balance is 150, and you can buy it for 120, and it's going to be it's never going to go to the foreclosure sale. Right. Because or if it does, you're going to get paid immediately. You don't have to foreclose. It's already in the process, and it's almost ready to go.
Yeah. It's totally different dynamic. It's almost the complete opposite scenario of what it was back in the Great Recession. So I know when I talked to folks like you and Eddie and stuff, like you had never seen a real estate market like it was in 08 and 09 during the recession.
Right.
And you have also never seen a market like it is today as far as investing these things. So it's so interesting about the note business. And this is what I love about it, is that every day is a new day.
Every day is a new day.
There's never a same thing going on. There's no two notes that I do due diligence the same way.
And, that due diligence factor, that you were talking about a minute ago, Justin, it was, it really depends on who you buy them from, but you're going to get a pretty significant, or who the servicer, who the default servicer is on those, right? The banks are, Fannie, Freddie, Ginnie Mae, which is HUD and VA and FHA and all that. They're not working through those loans. They have default servicing companies, and we can go in and we can get what that master report looks like, right? So we can see everything that's being done or has been done on that loan, and it's a pretty cool way to do due diligence. I mean, you've got to understand what that looks like, but when you're talking to guys like Justin and and so on, you've been there, you've done that, how to do that due diligence.
So I want to step back for a minute because we brought up something that I want to discuss a little bit, and then we talked about basically the lost mint process for some of these bigger banks or these bigger funds that get these non-performing loans. So back in this 08, 09 era, when those loans started just to pile up, let's say 2010, 2012 timeframe, is really when we started seeing them released to people like us that can play with those $50 to $100 million funds. So a lot of those guys, they knew that the loans were either going to go through foreclosure, and there wasn't a lot of lost mint help that could be provided to the borrower, because more than likely it was just going to be a long shot to have them be able to afford to be able to repay this, even giving them breaks by lowering payments or, putting payments on the back end, deferring them and stuff. Today, it's a little bit different. So my question to you, Joe, and what I'd like to talk about quickly is, do you see a lot of these funds, and do you think a lot of these banks have learned their lessons on what happened in the Great Recession versus today as far as lost mint? So I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't see, even though we have a sliver of loans, the 1.9 million that are non-current, and that a lot of them could go foreclosure, I think a chunk of them will go through foreclosure, but I think a vast majority of them will end up going through some lost mint because of all this appreciation. Do you see the same thing, or what is your take on that?
No, I 100% see the same thing, guys. We're not calling the market's not going to crash. The banks aren't going to crash. Wall Street, this time because of the mortgage market isn't, for sure. So it's a whole different thing, and their qualification standards were different. And again, these are equitable loans, meaning there's somewhere between 25 to 50% in equity between what's owed and what, and what the house is worth. So, you're wondering, well, how does somebody live in a house for 3 years and not make a payment? And the bank doesn't do anything about it. But remember, the whole court system was shut down for almost 2 years, right? That just opened back up in January. So that's why you're seeing those spikes in foreclosure at this point. Some will go through loss mitt and they'll get a modification, or they'll get it thrown onto the back end of the loan and all of those things. And some will just be, the sellers will just sell them and they'll get their equity and they'll move on with their lives. It's an entirely different audience there today, and but there's not going to be the bank failures that there was back, because it was way too, Deutsche Bank had made, way too many plays.
So Fannie and Freddie and Ginnie, the government-sponsored entities that we talked about, they released some of their bad debt so that the big Wall Street firms like Goldman Sachs and other people can start buying loans for them. So do you have any information as of today that I haven't heard from before about them selling off large pools of loans?
Well, it's going to be, understand that it is when banks lower price band loans, right, Justin? Bank loans that are $150,000 less in or less in current value as is value. The banks, they don't want to foreclose on those loans, right? They would prefer to just sell those loans at at 50 cents on the dollar versus doing it, because banks aren't in the house. They don't want a house. They're in the money business, right? They're not in the house business. And understand that, they write those balances down and then they get to, so they don't really lose the money, right? So it's not, I don't ever feel sorry for a bank. If you want to ban for that back and forth, we can, but I don't. If you do, Justin, that's fine. But so they're selling those loans, and that gives investors like, Justin and myself and you guys out there that are interested, that gives us an opportunity.
Absolutely.
So, yep, that's where we are. And so again, I think people like, Revolve and Bill by Mail guys, they're saying, guys, this is going to be a 2 to 3 year thing. So it's not a flash in the pan. It's
flash in the pan,
something that we can work through. So
I like that. That's a good, that may be the name of our show today, our episode today.
Yeah. Flash in the pan.
Flash in the pan. I like that. Yeah. So Joe, so the audience knows, you work at Note School as an educator, who's the founder is Eddie Speed.
Right.
And that's the company that I went through. So if anyone's wanting to reach out and like get more information and trying to be a note investor, obviously Note School is the platform that I would promote, and I would,
thank you.
Let you plug that as well. I don't know if there's a way that people can direct themselves to get in front of you or in front of Note School, but I want to give you a chance to plug that real quick.
Yeah, certainly. Just go to noteschool.com or send an email saying, hey, I want more information on Note School. Go to info at noteschool.com. Just say, hey, I saw Joe or I saw Justin and Joe on a podcast and love more information. No pressure. Just go and check it out. And guys, I know, Justin he's been a multi-award winning Note School investors and done many, many, many deals. So, Justin, you have done an amazing job. If there was a poster child for Note School, you would certainly be on the short list for that. So, guys, Justin knows I'm so proud of him. He knows the business, and he's got a lot of folks out there that invest with him, on a daily, weekly basis. So, that's your plug there, Justin, but it comes from the heart.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. It's very, very kind of you. And you've always been a friend to me and not just a mentor, but a good friend to me as well. And I appreciate
Absolutely.
all the stuff and knowledge that I've learned from you over the years and stuff. And thanks for plugging Note School, because I'm definitely an ambassador for them and want people to encourage people to go. If they want some serious training in this business, this is the place to go. And I fully commit to, saying that.
Thank you.
So Joe, switching things up a little bit, we're kind of getting ready to close out on today's episode. So I want to know, so you educate, this is what's cool. And this is what I love about Note School, is that not only do you teach it, do you talk the talk, but you walk the walk as well.
Absolutely.
So as right now, I know you have a lot of time that you spend, educating and preparing and doing a lot of video casting like we're doing today and podcasting. Right. But have you been in the market lately to get any opportunities to jump into some non-performing or some performing loans, or have you personally been able to find a few deals here and there and just like, this is pretty neat. This is a little bit different than it was before COVID.
Well, now that you say that, so, I have some connections in the business. I've been around a while. So I have a couple of hedge fund managers that I tell, if you've got anything in central South Florida, let me know, especially in the non-performing place. And I just bought 5 non-performing loans from one of my industry, from a hedge fund guy. And he sends them to me, and he gives me first shot at some of them. So I just bought 5, and we're in the process of working them out. So doing it every day. We've got a portfolio of performing loans. And so, the cool thing about the note business though, Justin, is you don't have, it's easier. I'm plugging being the bank here, right?
Right.
It's much easier being the bank than it is being the landlord or anything else in the business, because you do the work once and you get paid for a long time.
That's right. That's awesome. So good luck with those 5 non-performing loans, and I'd hope to hear a little bit about them, maybe some case studies after you start working on them for the next
I'll
this
keep
year.
you posted. They're nice properties. These are all in the Fort Lauderdale, Boca Raton, Fort Lauderdale area. So these are some nice properties.
Oh, nice.
Yep.
Cool. All right, Joe. So any final thoughts or any books that you've read lately, or any sort of podcasts that you've listened to that are just, either fun or they're just, a part of you growing as a business person?
I would like to promote Note School TV. We go live with Note School TV every Wednesday at 11:05 Central Time. Check us out. Go to the Note School TV channel, and you can see some of the back episodes. I just got through recording one a little while ago before we started this. So, check that out. It's going to give you a lot of insight. Justin has been a guest on there as well a couple of times, and we'll have him back this year. And so just it's not a salesy thing. It's just, so here's what's going on in the industry, and here's some folks that are doing this every day. So, but check out Note School TV. We would love to have you as a viewer.
Yeah, and I get a lot of my information and my data from basically what you are able to harvest and mine from out there as well. So it's nice to get that information on a monthly basis. I think you really dive deeper into what's going on and stuff.
Yeah,
so.
At the last Wednesday of every month, we do our industry update, and it's about 40 minutes of deep dive into what's going on in the industry. And by the way, Justin, that monthly update is the highest by a factor of 10 than any other of the shows there, because people look for that monthly update as to what's going on in the industry.
Yeah, the possible fear, right?
Right.
What's perceived
there's
as fear.
The fear of investing, and then there's the fear of missing out on investing, right?
Those they call it FOMO, fear of missing out.
Fear of missing out.
Joe, thank you again so much for being on the podcast, episode number 5 today of the Be the Bank podcast, brought to you by BrightPath Notes. And so I look forward to hanging out with you pretty soon, and also jumping on the Note School TV show here in the future as well. So if you guys didn't know already, if you go to the BrightPath Notes YouTube channel, you can watch the video version of this podcast as well. You can check out Joe and his setup and his little ducks in the background. Maybe Joe's a duck hunter too. I don't know. He does have a fan boat.
Carved, hand-painted ducks.
That you did?
Decoy? No, I didn't do them. They're decoys when you duck hunt, right? I've got a couple of Labrador retrievers, and we duck hunt a little bit too, but not so much anymore.
We should have dove into that at the beginning. That's way more interesting than what we normally talk about, right? So you got a fan boat too. I meant to ask you about the fan boat.
You'll have to come down. We'll bring the camper down to Disney. We'll stay at Fort Wilderness. We'll go up there with ours, and we'll have some fun.
Hey, I'm all for it. The plan's in the making right now. I can sense it right before school starts. All right, brother.
There you go.
All right, take care, Joe. Thank you very much. This is episode number 5, brought to you by BrightPath Notes, and we will see you next time on the Be the Bank podcast.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for listening to Be the Bank. We hope you learned something from today's show. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review us. Plus, check out our BrightPath Notes channel on YouTube and follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Be the Bank and on Instagram at Be the Bank Podcast. Be the Bank is sponsored by BrightPath Notes. Thanks again for listening.